Hello, gorgeous. I'm back today with a podcast episode for you guys. You can listen to this on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever else podcasts are heard. So today's topic is something that was requested by some of my students and clients, and the topic is how not to sabotage the honeymoon period. And so I would call this the first 18 months to 2 years of marriage. So as they say, once you solve one problem, you create new problems. So solving the problem of people, finding their soulmate, getting married, then creates the next set, right, of things that we have to work through. And a lot of times what can happen when you do rotational dating and you get engaged, you get married, is that you're like, okay, well, now what, right? Like, what's the next level? How do I deal with now living with another person and dealing with the day-to-day of married life? So this is for my students and clients that are newlyweds and they are wondering how they can navigate the challenges that can come in, naturally so, in those first couple of years of marriage. I think some of these tips are great for any period of your marriage, or even through your engagement, but it's specifically I'm targeting those people that are newlyweds. So I have some resources here for you and some things to think about. But before I even go into that, I want to give you guys sort of the wisdom that my sister-in-law gave me when I got married to Irfan about 15 and a half years ago. And this has helped me so much. Oh my God. I feel like this has been like the foundation of creating this robust marriage with my husband. That's why it is so important to make sure that you are surrounded by some people, whether it's online or in person, that are happily married, they're healthfully married, they are balanced in their views of life, and they've been through some stuff and they know how to navigate the challenges of, and ups and downs of marriage. So I'm very blessed to have people like my sister-in-law in my life that I can bounce ideas or things by. So what she said to me was, she said, Mina, in when you get married, there's two different people coming into this union with two completely different mindsets, two completely different backgrounds, two different sets of parents, two different childhoods, sometimes even two different cultures, right? Like that wasn't true of Irfan and I, but like you could be marrying someone that's from a different culture than you. And even if it's the same culture, like he had a different childhood than you did, right? He's got different parents that gave him different values and different mindsets. So she was saying that when you get married, you're essentially merging these two different mindsets, energies together. So of course there's going to be challenges. Of course there's going to be misunderstandings, right? Like she gave me the example of like some people have a completely different sense of humor. And also some people don't even understand a sense of humor. None of those people are right or wrong. They're just different. So if your partner cracks a joke and you didn't come from a family where you grew up around like people kind of like poking fun at each other or like making light of things, you might be really offended, or it might be the other way around. So this was really helpful for me to hear that I'm supposed to spend the first 2 years of my marriage just understanding my husband and not taking things too personally. Those were her exact words. She was like, listen, I'm not saying that my brother is perfect, right? But she's like, he has a good heart. You married a really amazing guy that will give you the world. Now, it is your responsibility as his wife to not take things too personally in the first couple of years of marriage. He's just trying to understand you, and you're just trying to understand him. And she said, when you want something, be very clear and very direct and don't make him guess, because he might not be able to have the capabilities to guess things that you think he should just naturally know. Things you assume should be common sense for him may not be common sense for him. So this was so life-giving for me in the beginning of my marriage. And so that's what I want to pass on to you. Okay. So now I want to give you guys some resources. So Brene Brown, she is I don't know how she currently defines herself, but she studied like shame and vulnerability. She's written many books, and she has this concept about, I don't know if it's her original concept, but she talked about this in one of her talks, that essentially people are always filling up or taking from each other's like emotional jar. And so the way I would like to explain this to you is, when you get married, you're both essentially coming in with like these empty emotional jars. Now, when there's positive interactions in your marriage, those jars get filled up, right? So you got your personal jars, and then you have like this one jar now called the marriage. So let's say that your partner does something really sweet for you. Oh, you give him some points, you put a couple of coins in there. You do something sweet for your husband, couple more points, right? This is filling up that emotional intimacy jar. But what happens oftentimes in the honeymoon period is that when you're now merging lives together, you're living together, you're householding together, people start getting triggered by little things, right? You get into arguments about little things. When you get into an argument, when there's a negative situation, that emotional jar is being depleted. You're taking from the bank account. And when you keep taking without filling it back up, that jar is gonna go bankrupt. Just like if you had a bank account and you kept withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing, and you were never putting any money back into it, you would go bankrupt essentially, right? So of course, there will be disagreements, especially early on, because you guys don't really know each other that well. You don't know how your partner deals with stress. You don't know how they cope with insecurities. You don't know how they deal with like, difficulties and ups and downs in life. You're just learning about them. So what helped Irfan and I when in those early years when we were kind of like triggering each other because we were coming from two different like childhoods, we were triggered about different things, is when everything was fine, when we were at like a peak, we decided to set some ground rules for how we would have disagreements, how we would navigate arguments. Because what would happen is that in the heat of the moment, people end up saying things that they don't really mean. You almost have to like separate you and your partner into like two parts. There's like the divine part that's like connected and like in the field, right? In God. And then there's the part that's triggered, that's in ego, right? That's the part that's like kind of communing with the devil. Well, when you or your partner are triggered, sometimes if you haven't learned better techniques, you might end up saying some really, really hurtful things. And that can cause a lot of damage in your marriage because, sometimes people have trouble forgetting those things. It depends on their emotional intelligence. So we had to set some ground rules of how we were going to manage disagreements. And we agreed that it was okay and healthy to have disagreements. We agreed that we did not want each other to withhold information or walk on eggshells. But we also agreed that screaming, saying mean things, saying hurtful things was off the table. Now, even after we agreed that, we kept doing it for a while because it was old habits. It really taught us that, oh my God, we almost become like someone else. We're not in our best self when we're triggered. So we had to learn to say things like, hey, it seems like we're both really triggered right now. Let's like get back to neutral. Let's like shelve this for a moment, but promise each other that we will come back to it when we are both feeling better. Because we want to resolve issues, obviously. It's not like we want to sweep things under the rug because they will come back to haunt you later. But what we want to do is we want to discuss them when we are both in our divinity, when we are both in source, when we're both feeling high vibe, not when either of us is triggered. Okay. So that's the number one thing I want to share. Secondly, I would say that if when there are arguments, don't let things fester. Give grace. It's okay to pause. Like I just said, it's okay to say, hey, I think we're triggered. We're very heated. Let's just get to neutral and we'll come back and we'll talk about this in a day, in 2 days when we're not triggered. And so then when you come back to it, two rational people that love each other are coming back to the topic, not two triggered people that are just hell bent on defending their own point and not taking into consideration what their partner values and needs, right? So think of it as when you're arguing, when you're attacking each other, when you're triggered, that you're playing with the devil. And when you're in love and when you're communicating and when you're open to hearing each other's viewpoints, you're in God, okay? And you will have moments of both. We're all human and we're all trying to learn. And some of us didn't get these skill sets in our childhood, and that's okay. We're learning now and we're learning together. So the next thing I want to say is that it will be really beneficial to you in the first couple of years of marriage to stay very curious. Actually, I try to do that even now because 15 and a half years into my marriage, I'm still learning about my husband, right? Like we're all evolving and we're always learning. But especially in the beginning, you want to stay curious. Okay. And what you can do is how I was able to do this is that I learned a lot about my husband and his personality actually from his family. So each other's families can be a great resource, right? Like I through from my in-laws, I learned like how my husband reacts when he's upset or when something's really bothering him, but he doesn't really want to share it. If they didn't tell me that, I don't even know how long it would have taken me to notice that because that's not how I deal with stress. Right. And then also the point that when they told me that like if something's really bothering him, he doesn't always discuss it right away, but like look for these signs. I'm like, oh my God, this is gold. So when I would notice that, I would, you know, ask my husband, hey, you seem a little stressed out. When you're ready, or if you're open to, like, I'm here for you, like, you can share it. And sometimes he would share it, and other times he wouldn't. He would just say, oh, it's just, something at work or something with my parents. And like, and that's fine. But at least I know that it's that first of all, he knows that I'm there for him and he knows that I'm an intuitive wife and I'm paying attention to him. And secondly, I know it's not about me, right? Because if I'm not asking and I see him stressed out, I might start making stories in my head that maybe it's me, maybe he doesn't love me, maybe, right? Like we tend to do that sometimes. Our insecurities can really come up, right? At our recent Orange County event, I talked about how women and men digest and metabolize trust very differently, and how women had had a very traumatic relationship with testosterone. We need men around that will protect us and will care for us, but testosterone can also seem kind of scary for us because the weakest man in the world can you know basically kill the strongest woman in the world with his bare hand. Like he can strangle her. Like that's just the power of testosterone. Just like there's species like chimps and apes that have a lot more testosterone than human males, and they can rip a man apart. So testosterone is something that we require in our lives and we've evolved to need, but we're also afraid of it. So when we have a partner that's seeming distant, or when we have a partner that's seeming upset, it might not even have anything to do about us, but like we can start creating stories. Like a lot of times in the beginning when my husband was stressed and I would ask him about it, he would tell me, oh, he got a call that his dad is sick, right? Like, so it had nothing to do about me, but I could start creating stories that, oh my God, maybe he doesn't really love me, or, maybe I did something. So stay curious and always give the goodness of intent and say, hey, um, are you okay? Like, did you want to talk about something? And then give them space. They don't always want to talk about it, and that's okay, right? Sometimes I think men don't want to bring negativity from work or other places in their life into their marriage. And so they don't always just, want to do that. Men have evolved to like kind of burden the shoulder of life. And so I can understand that. Okay. So stay curious. The next thing I want to share with you is learn each other's argument style and coping strategies. So, that whole concept of love languages that I think it was Gary Chapman that talked about that in his book, if I'm not mistaken. I love that concept. I'm going to take a sip of my water. Give me a second, please. I love that concept. And I think there's more to it. I think he was really on to something. There's languages of how people receive love, but there's also languages of how people like metabolize disagreements or how they want you to deal with their bad mood. So part of staying curious is asking your partner questions. These can be such amazing questions to ask even when you're dating, when you're engaged, when you're married, even if you've been married for like 30 years. Hey, go and ask your partner these questions now. Like have a fun date night where, you're just kind of learning things about each other and seeing each other in a completely new light. So you could say something like, I'm just going to throw out some examples, but just don't limit yourself. There's so many more that you could use. You could say something like, hey, what makes you feel most loved? Okay, that's a great one. Okay. Another one is, please describe your perfect day. Like this was so special to me because I remember this one day we went out on a Saturday and we went sightseeing, we had lunch, we did a little bit of shopping, and coming home, I was just such in a state of joy. I said to my husband, I said, "Today was my perfect day." And he was like, "This is your perfect day?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Okay, we're gonna do this every Saturday." I'm like, "Yes, I want to have my perfect day," right? And I really appreciated that he was like, "Oh, if this is your perfect day, like we're gonna do this more often. Like we're gonna make this a thing." So ask your partner what is their perfect day, and you can infuse elements of their perfect day into everyday life, right? Like for example, even when I said that, I started dissecting why was that my perfect day? Like what was it about that day that was so amazing for me? And then the next layer was, well, how can I infuse this into my everyday life? How can every day feel like my perfect day? And even if it's like in little small ways, right? Like one thing that came up when I dissected that was that I really enjoyed going out to eat with my husband, better than just eating at home. And he was like, "How come?" And so I really thought about it. And what came up is that when we were eating at home, we were sitting side by side. And when we eat in a restaurant, we sit across from each other. So that was something that I wouldn't have even thought of if we weren't curious about each other and asking these questions. And, evolutionarily speaking, when you're sitting side by side, like when you're driving in a car, um, and we glance at each other quickly when we're communicating, it actually distorts the facial features. And that's why they say a car is not a good place to have disagreements and arguments, because our primitive brain receives your partner's quick glances as threats, as if an animal in the wild is getting ready to attack you. So it can really escalate the situation in your nervous system. So look at how just being curious about, hey, what's your perfect day? How do you deal with stress? Like, what is your go-to coping mechanism when you feel like, you're having a bad day? Like being curious. So when I asked my husband, like, how do you want me to deal if I notice that you're in a bad mood? His answer was that I want you to give me the goodness of intent. Like, don't immediately go into assuming that it's something that you did or you said or it's about you. Like, maybe I'm just having a bad day. Maybe I'm just having a bad mood. Maybe I'm worried about my parents. So he's like, just give me that goodness of intention. And he's like, and if you can like do something like really sweet and kind for me to show me that you care. And so I said, well, can you give me some examples of that? And so he gave me some examples. It took him a long time to give me the examples, but I was patient and he was able to give me some actual examples. And I was like, okay, I can do that. Right. But that I really appreciate that because my default at that time was to assume that he was mad at me. You have to learn these things about each other. Another one is what makes you feel loved. Okay. These are meant to be playful. We're not like interrogating them. This is not an interview. It's just sort of a playful thing that we're doing to learn more about our partner. Okay. So let me see if there was anything about this section. more until I move into the next. Okay. The other one I would say I would add to this is that learn your partner's appreciation language. To add to what Gary Chapman said about love languages, could say, well, how do you feel appreciated? Another one is when you that you can ask your partner when they're triggered, how do they want you to deal with it? So some people say leave them alone, right? Some people say that they're going to say leave them alone, but actually don't leave them alone. Like definitely check up on them. All of it is valid, all of it is good, but you need to know more about your partner. Like you as his wife, as a husband and wife, you have like the most vulnerable position to learn about your partner and help them heal their insecurities, their triggers. You know, marriage is such a beautiful spiritual grounds for helping each other work through the ups and downs of marriage. Like that's what makes a robust marriage. There is this myth that, you know, like relationships should be easy. Well, let me tell you, I am surrounded in my real life with my family, with my husband's family, with our neighbors, with our community, with healthy people married for 40, 50, 60 years. And all of them say that they had to go through a lot of stuff and learn and to deal with that stuff, learn about each other, do inner work to have that robust relationship. And this was such a learning experience for me because I'm like, oh, well, if relationships should just be easy, if it's the perfect partner, it's going to be easy. And none of them said that. None of them said that it was easy. In fact, to me, their relationships now look really easy, and they are, but they said it's because in the beginning they went through a lot of things that helped them learn more about each other and learn new skill sets. Okay. That brings me to the next point. So my next point is that here's a question that I want you to ask yourself. Does my partner have the skill sets required for my request? This was something that I learned on early, that my thing was, okay, well, like he should just know how to communicate with me, right? If he loved me, he would just know. He should just know how to console me when I'm upset. But the truth is, how the hell is he supposed to know that? Right? Again, going back to what my sister-in-law said, everyone comes from a different background. Everyone has a different childhood. Everyone has different values, different skill sets that they've learned. So assuming that something is common sense is not the smartest thing to do. So I had to assume in a lot, like really ask this question, and I learned that no, he didn't know. He didn't have the skill sets in a lot of things I was requesting. So we had to learn them together. And one thing my husband always says when you're dealing with men, you don't ever want to come across as like, I know it all, I'm above you, and I'm going to teach you something. Because in a marriage, in the way that men perceive hierarchy, they want to be the leader of the home, right? They want to do things together for you, with you, or they want to lead you towards it. So when you come from that, they feel like you're coaching them, you're teaching them, and that puts them in the second place position. And so the second place position in a role where he's supposed to be the leader can feel is emasculating to them. So when you approach him, it could be like, hey, I noticed that we have some we need some new communication skills, or we need some more new coping skills. Let's watch this video together, or let's read this book together, or what do you think we can do about this? Like learning together is going to be the glue to your marriage, to your union. And that's going to require you to give each other grace if you make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect, especially in those first couple of years when you're just supposed to be learning about each other. The devil is in taking things too personally. The devil's in laying blame for every little thing, not offering grace. Like, though that's where it starts deteriorating very quickly. The truth is, babe, that marriage, because of its peaks that come in, you're in a new relationship, you're having these very high emotional experiences, right? A lot of firsts, first time you're intimate, first time you do this, first time you do that. So obviously a lot of insecurities, a lot of worthiness issues, a lot of what I call container issues, upper limit problems can show up during this time. And some people don't have the skills to deal with these things in a healthy way. Some people can start second guessing their worth. I've even heard where, like, some men feeling like that their partner is like so amazing, so beautiful, so like sweet and kind, then they start questioning, oh my God, I'm not worthy, right? Like, oh my, who am I to receive this? And then sabotaging it by picking fights with their partner, or get like making small things big deals, or saying, oh well, you were looking at that person or whatever, right? Things like that. And of course women do this too. Like, I know when I got married and my husband retired me and started providing for me, so much came up of like feeling like, am I really worthy of receiving this level of worth, this level of care in my life? And so then insecurities popped up. And so we want to make sure that we are becoming self-aware. You're human. Yes, these things will come up. Your partner is also human, but stay, as long as both of you guys stay willing to grow, stay willing to learn, whether it's to go to therapy or watch, YouTube videos together about healthy relationships, healthy coping mechanisms. You can read books together. And if your partner doesn't like reading books, read a book and like summarize it for him. Say, hey babe, I read this amazing book, and these three like the things that they talked about were really interesting. What do you think? And so that way you're still kind of bringing those strengths to each other, those things, and you can have a discussion about it. Okay. The next thing I'm going to say is that notice what triggers your partner and learn to soothe their nervous system and de-escalate. So sometimes what happens is one partner will get triggered and then trigger the other partner, and they're now, you both are in a fight or flight situation, and either you're arguing and fighting or you're in freeze mode and not talking to each other. And then one of you has to like de-escalate within yourself, emotionally regulate, and then help the other person do so. Well, this could take hours, days, weeks, and the longer you let that fester, and depending on what you're both come into the marriage with stories, with insecurities, it can really escalate. A little small little mole can turn into a big ginormous mountain, right? So learn to de-escalate. And what I did is, first I learned what triggered me and what escalated it, right? And within me, it was like, okay, I was fine. And then what happened? Okay, well, I said this, and then he said that, and then I thought this, and then I retaliated with this, and then he said this. And I'm like, oh my God, so this was the root cause. Okay, well, the next time that happens, how can I cope with this better? Okay. If I'm creating a story in my head, do I have to say that out loud, or should I journal on that first? Should I like sit with that first? Should I really fact check that within myself before blurting it out and then triggering him even more, right? So once I learned how to regulate my own nervous system, and of course I had help. You guys know I've been to therapy. I've hired countless coaches and mentors over the years. I've read thousands of books. I'm kind of obsessed with reading since I was a little girl. So I've watched like YouTube videos. Like, I learned how I can be a better human being within myself so that I can show up as a better wife and better mother. And then when I was able to work through this, I was able to notice, oh, when I said this is what triggers my partner. So how can I say this in a softer tone? How can I say this better? Does it really need to be said, right? Like, I was like playing, I'm in play mode. I'm like, okay, well, obviously for some reason this thing triggers my partner. How can I say this in a more loving way? How can I phrase it better? How can I change my tone? So of course, marriage is a long game. We're learning our partners for life. And so, yes, all of these things did take time. Inner work did take time. Regulating my own nervous system, my own emotional uh, intelligence took time, but I get to enjoy a very robust life and relationship now because I think it's called front loading, right? Like, we front loaded the process. And of course, we're still learning and still growing. Um, as a woman, we need to move with emotional control. We need to move with the ability to change the reality and change the energy of our home. We are the energy setters, right? Like that's just the fact. Like, as women, that's the part that God gave us. that we are going to set the energy, the culture of our relationship, okay? And never attack each other. It's always from a position of your couple bubble. I talked about this in my video the other day in my live. I'll link it in the description box, along with some other books and resources. Keep in mind, I have 13 years of content, free content on YouTube that you can watch that will help you, support you. There's countless books out there. I have over 83 courses that can help you. Help is always available. Resources are always available. You have to be open. You have to be willing to give this relationship the chance that it deserves. You went into this and your partner went into this with good intentions. You went into this with a good heart. You went into this with commitment, and so did your partner. Don't forget that, right? It's really vulnerable to get married to someone, to say that you are going to be bonded through life now, that you are going to be business partners and life partners and soulmates and co-parents and join two families together. That takes a lot, and you've already done that. So don't let the devil in on your marriage. The final thing I'm going to leave you with is that the way that women and men have evolved, unfortunately, women are the more agreeable and the more influenceable gender. This is just an evolutionary fact. I'm so glad that my culture understands this. I know it's a little politically incorrect and taboo to talk about this in the Western culture, but it is a scientific fact. And so you want to be careful who you bring your marital problems to. Because the truth is, the way women have evolved, one bad apple in the group can take down the entire group. So if you are having a bad day in your marriage and you go to a group of friends and there's one person that's negative in that group, there's one person that instills doubt in you, there's one person that's jealous and maybe doesn't even know it, and they can ruin your entire experience. All of a sudden, a simple argument that could have been easily resolved, in fact, that argument maybe would have made your marriage stronger in the long haul. Now, this friend or this family member can put a negative spin on it and leave you second guessing. So understand that I understand as a woman that I am designed to be highly influenced, especially by other women, and that I'm designed to be highly agreeable. So because of that, I am very mindful who I talk to, who I speak to. I have family members that I trust with my life who have been happily married for 40, 50 years. They've been through life, they have done inner work, they're balanced people. They're not going to egg me on if I'm having a bad day. They're going to say, okay, well, let's work through this situation. What's really going on? Let's talk about it. They're going to be, at best, like, at worst, like neutral parties. They're not going to be like, oh, he's a jerk, leave him. I can't believe he said that. So be careful. As women, we need to use our consciousness to overcome our DNA programming. And I'm telling you, I've even seen complete families destroyed because one bad apple, one woman with bad intentions or insecurities or unworthiness issues take down the entire family through her negativity. So be careful who you speak to. I'm not saying that your friends and family members are evil. I'm sure they all mean well, but people are dealing with their own stuff, right? We live in a society now where people have massive like mental health issues. People have massive depression. People have insecurities, unworthiness issues. They feel like they don't belong, they don't have community. And so oftentimes they're looking for community even if it's negative. It's like, you know that saying, misery loves company? So protect, put a divine fence, a loving container around your union, around your marriage. And when you need to talk to people, yes, you get to be supported. Absolutely. I do believe in that. I do believe that marriages and children are reared in villages. However, make sure that your village and your support system is 100% healthy. Okay. And trust yourself. Drop in when the ego shows up, when you get triggered, take a moment, take a deep breath, drop in, go into your heart and say, is my partner evil? Is my partner, blah, blah, blah? Or are we just having a little moment right now? Are we just learning about each other? Are we just learning to cope? Are we learning new skill sets? Are we having an upper limit problem, a container issue? Is this just a moment that's going to pass and in fact make us stronger? Or are you going to let the devil win that's telling you that the whole thing is ruined now because you had one little argument, right? So I hope this finds you well. I have some resources for you, some free ones, some low cost, and some of my courses as well that are a little bit more of an investment, but all of that is available to you. Drop in, check in, and I hope this finds you well. Bye, love.